Hi, everyone. I'm here with Loulou James of the Buttafly. I'm so excited for us to have this conversation, Loulou. Thank you for reaching out to me several months ago and sending me your beautiful creation. So I want to hand this over to you. What is the Buttafly? A little bit about you. How did you even create this thing?
Okay, so I am a physiotherapist by background. I thought I was leaving behind that profession, and I trained as a yoga teacher. But before that, I actually trained as an Arvigo therapist. So I trained as an Arvigo therapist in 2007. And there's a little bit of background to that. I was having a whole load of problems in the pelvic and the abdominal and the low back region. And, you know, as these things work out, you know this, I was on the internet and I was doing some research and I came across Arvigo therapy, and it turned out that there was a self-care weekend the following weekend, I think it was. And then I did the self-care weekend. And then 6 weeks after that, I'd already decided that I wanted to take it further. And it turned out that Rosita was coming over to the UK, and that was the last training that she did. So a lot of my problems were born out of long-term stress and quite significant bullying. And so I was holding a lot of tension in the abdominal area. And then in 2005, I flipped over backwards on my rollerblades, and I fractured my sacrum. And at the time I was pregnant, and I lost the baby. And but I had three miscarriages in a row. And so that was kind of really what took me down. I don't actually tell my story. And the reason why I don't normally tell my story is because I definitely don't want people to feel sorry for me. I'm very accepting of the journey. But it was pretty traumatic at the time. And I was looking for something different. I was looking for answers. And so the Arvigo therapy, there's no doubt, it changed my work, it changed my practice. I ended up getting an agency job at the local hospital in physiotherapy in the women's health department. And I had the most incredible line manager, probably of my whole entire career there. And she let me do what I wanted to do. And I was already practicing yoga and meditation by that time. And what I found is that when women were coming to me with pelvic floor problems, which is why so many of them were coming into the department, I just did relaxation with them for the first session they saw me. There would be lots and lots of questions, of course. And then I would send them away with relaxation exercises. And I would say to them, I didn't want them to do any pelvic floor exercises whatsoever. And a week later, they would come back for a follow-up, and so many of them were already an awful lot better. So I knew I was really onto something. And then I gave them an abdominal massage, Arvigo therapy. I didn't have the time to do the full Arvigo therapy, but it was really enough for so many of these women. So the Arvigo therapy changed how I looked at the body, how I treated back problems, abdominal problems, and I did a lot of work in that area. And I was also working with the military and agency work, so it was coming into my work everywhere. But when I started to take my yoga practice a little bit further, it just didn't make sense to me that people were sitting on this rectangular block. It's not ergonomic. And I just saw everywhere people sitting with really poor posture. And I thought, what is the point of coming to a yoga class and sitting with really poor posture? And I didn't actually set out to design the Buttafly, I was sitting in meditation and I kept on getting this design coming through, and I kept on trying to chuck it out because I'm like, no, I'm meditating. And eventually, I mean, it was really quite a long time before I just took pen to paper and made a drawing. And then I sat on that drawing for quite some time. And then I met a guy who made me a prototype. And from there, things just kind of really, you know, went into action. And what happened was when the first shipment arrived, there's no doubt. I mean, as a seat and as a yoga block, it really works. You know, it's ergonomic. And a lot of people look at it and say, oh, it makes so much sense. And I arrange my blocks, this, that, and the other, and they kind of recreate their own version of the Buttafly. But what happened was, so this was in 2015, 10 years after I had my fracture. And I was still getting a couple of different symptoms. The first one is that where the fracture healed, it left me with a very large knobble of bone. So it's like the joint on my thumb. And when I lie down at the end of a yoga class, flat on the floor, the knobble of bone always hits the ground first. So I was a little bit like the Princess and the Pea story. I'd be like 2, 3, 4 yoga mats. And I found lying on my back very uncomfortable. And the other symptom, which is I literally for the first time heard someone else complain of this the other day, and it's the first time ever that anyone has ever described an experience similar to my own. And that is what would happen at nighttime. I would get this buildup of pressure in my sacrum. And it was very much, I didn't realize at that point that it was an internal thing that was going on. But what I didn't understand is how I would roll over onto my side, even onto my tummy, and this pressure would not give up. So I would have to get up, I'd have to walk around, I'd have to literally get up in the middle of the night and be up for half an hour, and then it would subside and I could go back to bed. Anyway, what happened was one day I was doing my yoga practice and I went to lie down in Shavasana. I had 3 yoga mats underneath me and I just slipped across at the Buttafly, and all of a sudden I thought, wait a minute, what happens if I put this underneath my pelvis? And literally the shape will just allow my sacrum to be floating in the indent. And so I did that and it felt amazing. I laid there for 20 minutes. I did some meditation. When I came round, I took the Buttafly out. I realized that my relationship with the floor had changed, and I hadn't, because I hadn't designed it for that reason. I had no expectation that that would happen. And interestingly, it's not that I doubted my experience, but I didn't know what to do with the experience. So I didn't do anything with it. I just carried on looking after myself. And after a few weeks, a lot of this symptoms that I would have, this build up at nighttime, just completely went away. So I started using it with other people, and every time I was having incredible results with them. And there isn't anything I can say, there isn't anything as a physio that I've ever used that has been so consistent in its results. But one of the things that was really interesting, and I think a super important part of the journey, is that it was so effective that in the beginning, it was a little bit like a party trick. Oh, come on, lie down, try this. And what would happen is people would often burst into tears. There was this emotional, real release going on. And when I was thinking about this the other day, and I thought, that's so interesting. I don't get that anymore. Why don't I get that? People will still have the physical release and they'll still have an emotional shift, but they don't get that quite dramatic, traumatic explosion of emotion, whatever it is, that comes up with tears and crying, things like that. And the difference is that because now I know to hold the space. And so it's quite tricky because I realize that not everyone is into the space holding thing. But it's something that feels quite dear to my heart because I've gone through so many different trainings, and particularly the Arvigo training. And I just know that when you hold that space and you bring a certain reverence and a sacredness to a treatment, it just makes all the difference.
Yeah, wow. So first, I want to honor you for sharing your story and bringing your emotion and your experience into the space, and just how, sacred and holy that is on your journey, and how many people can relate to that in their own ways. The second piece is, even though we've gone over 10 minutes, I will just break this into a few Instagram videos. So don't worry about that, because there's a lot of material here. And the piece that you are speaking about, space holding, it's the core of any kind of body work, really. Because what we're talking about is, am I safe in the world? Every kind of contraction is a call for being safe. Like whenever we get into a contraction, we perceive a lack of safety. And it seems that modern humans don't always know how to decontract, how to expand again post a trauma. So what you're presencing with the sacrum is so powerful. I'm curious if you want to follow that thread a little bit more around trauma, around safety, around why the sacrum in particular.
Yeah. Well, there are many reasons. I have quite a lot to say around that. Sometimes it's hard to know where to start. Certainly, the sacrum is that one bone that joins the top and the bottom of the body. It's a significant part of the spine. And the spine is our central axis. So from a purely anatomical point of view, the sacrum is really important. And I think also the fact that there's so little movement at the sacroiliac joints. And so anything that the pelvis does is going to affect the spine. Anything that the spine does affects the pelvis. And it's just so fundamental to movement and to movement patterns. And we also, of course, have fascia and connective tissue, which joins the lower limbs, in particular to the spine. And I think that the psoas muscle is the only muscle that I know of that has 2 books written about it, just an isolated muscle. And I tend not to be mechanistic in my thinking. I don't like it when muscles are taken out in isolation or fascia is taken out in isolation, because I very much see us as this entire whole unit. However, there is something deeply significant about the psoas and the connecting tissue. I know that it's talked about in a lot of different body work, and for example, the traumatic release experiencing, the tray. I have quite a few tray therapists, by the way, using the butterfly technique. And my question to them is, how does the butterfly technique sit in relationship to the work that they're doing with tray? And the consensus so far is that it's more gentle. So for people who aren't ready to go on to experiencing the shaking and that is associated with the tray, that the butterfly technique is gentle, more gentle. So I think there is something around the connective tissue, the fascia. It seems really quite bonkers to me, but everybody who has a psoas problem, so I have quite a few cyclists using it, and people who always say that they stand with their bottom sticking out, and you know that there's something going on with their psoas there. There's an incredible release happening there, and I can't explain exactly what the order of play is. The other significant thing about the sacrum is the craniosacral system. So this system is quite new to me. I first came across it about 20 years ago, and it was the only therapy that really helped me when I first fractured my spine. I was having it delivered by an osteopath trained in craniosacral. And it's just the subtleties of that system I just find incredibly profound. And I've worked with a number of craniosacral therapists, again, around the butterfly technique. They are trained to feel their own craniosacral rhythm, which is called the tides, the ebb and flow. And they say that when they use the butterfly, it accentuates their tides, which is kind of exciting to know. And my understanding from talking with one craniosacral therapist in particular, who is probably someone who I have more respect for than any other body worker in the world, he says that it's quite easy to understand why the butterfly effect is so profound, because it's actually bringing the craniosacral system into that stillness. So that's called the still point effect. And we know that with anything, when we can come into stillness, it's an opportunity for resetting, whether we're talking about ourselves, whether we're talking about our computer, the phone, or whatever.
Yeah, powerful. Thank you. There's so much, like my brain will go in 50 different places. But one of the things that you said that was really, really potent was, in your meditations, this kept appearing. This redesigned contraption kept wanting to be born into the world. And this is the place where we take, the biomechanics of our body and we go into the non-ordinary. And it's like, what is healing? It starts to get really trippy. So I would love to know if there's anything more about, where did this come from? What is this spiritual piece for you? Because this is Indigenous work, like, where we're coming from talking about this, the roots of this body work comes from a place and a time and people that live between, always. And all of us do, like all of us come from those places. And from the dreaming comes healing and comes answers, whether that's plant medicine or a redesigned yoga block that can take you into the still point that resets the whole system. So what does all that mean to you?
Well, after I had the third miscarriage, I was how shall I say? I was already starting to talk with different people who, and having conversations that I'd never had before, but that actually I'd really been looking for my whole life. I've always been a seeker, but I didn't know where to look. And I think I got off track for quite some time. So what happened was I decided that I really wanted to honor these three souls who had chosen me to be their mother and who had trusted me enough that that I could cope with their very short life on this particular journey. And so I decided that I wanted to honor them in some way. And I reached out to a beautiful man who played the didgeridoo. And I literally saw, I was walking up my road and there was a VW camper van and a little sign saying, didgeridoo lessons. And I thought, oh, this is someone I need to connect with. And I connected with him and I heard him play. And then I asked him whether he would help me do the ceremony. I knew he was the right person. And we went out to a beautiful place. It was a Norman, the ruins of a Norman church. And we did this very beautiful session out there. And I can remember he gave me some advice on how to look after myself. And then he said to me, you know, I have a very strong feeling you're supposed to give birth to something. It's just not going to be another baby in his lifetime. And of course, you know, I did not want to hear it. I really didn't want to hear it. But it was very much part of the journey. And I can only really see that with hindsight. I see the people that I've helped and how it's helped myself, and how, even though I laugh when I talk, because you know, I've obviously met a lot of people in business, and I have people saying to me, friends saying to me that I'm going to write a book. And then I say, yeah, I'll probably call it The Reluctant Entrepreneur. It's not why I'm doing it, to be an entrepreneur. And for me, the gift is when I receive an email from someone, just when I feel like giving up, someone says to me, I can't thank you enough for bringing this into the world. It's helped me so much. And that was all I ever wanted to do, make a difference.
It's such a sweet story. I'm so grateful for you sharing that. And, you know, last week or the week before, I was writing a lot about eucalyptus trees, because part of what I do is protect trees all over the place. And just the relationship with the didgeridoo and how it's a whole tree and the resonance. And it's just very meaningful for me that you brought that piece in. And it felt like, you know, that the energy was really present. So I'm really grateful. And that answered that question on a level that's deeper than words. I'm curious where the name came from. I get a butt, I get it. But I'm curious why a butterfly and what that means to you.
Okay. Wow, I can't believe you're asking me these questions, and I feel like I have to honor myself and the whole process, but there's only very, very few people who know this story. So I decided to, after I had, which was a very personal experience with this man and the didgeridoo and the sound healing, we did a couple of sessions together. And then I thought about, okay, well, how am I going to really remember, you know, how am I going to remember these souls? And my partner and I had bought some really beautiful wind chimes. They were, you know, really long wind chimes and beautiful copper things. And we'd never put them up. We'd bought them about a year before. We'd never put them up. And I said, you know what? We had the perfect place to put them, up high outside, just outside the kitchen door, looking into the garden. And I said, why don't we put them up? And then every time we hear them sing, I'll be reminded of children's voices and children's laughter. And that's how I want to remember. So sound, I think, especially because I'm hard of hearing, sound is really important to me, and sound vibration. And so this is what we decided to do. And it's a beautiful sunny day. And my daughter, my grown-up daughter was with us. And he put the bracket up on the wall and came down the ladder and gave me these wind chimes. And I walked up the ladder in order to put them up on the bracket. And I just was overcome with emotion. And so I came back down the ladder and I gave them to him. And he put the wind chimes up. And then he and my daughter and myself, we all sat on the bench. And, you know, there was this quiet moment. And then all of a sudden there was a little breeze came. And the wind chimes played. And we looked up. And over the top of the wall came 3 white butterflies.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
And, you know, I just knew. And of course, I don't know whether you know, but in England anyway, it's a little white cabbage. I think it's a cabbage butterfly that is the first one to come out when the weather gets nice. And so of course it's beautiful because I love being out in nature, and I don't need to have the wind chimes. I don't need to have anything with me. I just need to be out in nature, and I get to see the butterflies. But you know, the name didn't come to me. First of all, it was quite intriguing. I was playing around with all sorts of other names for the butterfly, and I was a good year into the project, and all of a sudden I was playing around with words with someone very dear to me in my life, and the butterfly came up, and all of a sudden the whole thing, it was almost like everything just went into tunnel vision at that moment, tunnel hearing, tunnel vision, and all I could see were these butterflies. And then I just thought, oh, this is meant to be.
It's so beautiful, just on so many levels. Thank you for sharing that story, and thank you for the trust and the willingness to go so deep into this transmission, and how your life was the artwork for that, was the canvas for that. And when you say butterfly or Buttafly, it's like also the potential of the pelvis, like just within the obvious shapes, but the lightness and the transformation and all of the symbolism that's woven in. It's actually a really powerful thing to contemplate. So really grateful you shared that with me and with everyone who will hear this. How can people, do you have one next to you to show people?
Yeah, hold on. And it is funny, you know, because when people, like if I go to the shows and whatever, exhibitions and festivals, I did quite a lot of festivals this summer. And when people, when they get it, when they, you know, when I give it to them, they often do this. It's really intriguing. I mean, of course, particularly the women, but they'll often, it's like it's mine, and there's this sense of possession, and then they just say, oh, it's very tactile. So it's kind of really, you know, it's nice from that point of view. So here we are. So that's it from the side. It obviously has a little slope there, so it's ergonomic for sitting on. But there you go. There's the two wings. I call these, of course, the wings of the butterfly.
I love the purple one. That's so awesome. So how can people get this from you if they're not in the UK, if they've never heard of this before? I'll put all this information under the video on the various platforms, but obviously there's probably a website. What are the best ways to reach you and to try this out?
Yeah, so the website is The Buttafly, and that's spelt with an A instead of an ER. So that's BUTTAFLY, thebutterfly.com. And we ship all over the world. I've just had an order today for, now then, I was just trying to remember, what is WI? What's the WI state in the US? Is it Wichita?
It's
or Wisconsin?
I'm pretty sure. Wisconsin.
Okay. Well, I think I've covered every state, but I don't think I'd covered Wisconsin. So there we go. So woohoo! First one there. But I've sold yeah, I've shipped everywhere around the world. It's a little bit expensive because of the size, even though it's not heavy, but we do ship everywhere.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. This was really so sweet and so moving and so hopeful. I'm sure so many people listening with any kind of pelvic dysfunction or sacral injury, just knowing there's something they can do for themselves. So is there any kind of parting thought or last thing you want people to know?
I think the big thing is I heard a few years ago, I heard a marketeer talking about marketing, and she was talking about the mobile phone. And she said, you know, there was a time when we didn't know that we needed the mobile phone, a need you didn't know you had. And that's a little bit like how I feel about the butterfly. I use the Buttafly every day, and I use it not because I have symptoms anymore, but because I know that my emotions, every thought, every emotion, every action has a consequence for the spine. And so it's just a case of why wouldn't I do something to facilitate a realignment of the spine if it wants to? And it does every time. And so I'm intrigued by that still as a process. And so I think these days we talk a lot, especially through the last couple of years, there's been a lot of conversation about resilience. And how can we have more resilience? What can we do? Well, one of the things I know that we can do is to really ground. And the more that we ground, the more that we can just put our bare feet on Mother Earth and intentionally call in her support, and the more, the better aligned our spine, and so that we have this fluidity throughout the whole body, so that we can actually allow that vibration to come all the way through our physical system, because I think that's a really big thing. I really think that we are definitely mind, body, and spirit. So we can do a lot of work with the spirit, or we can do a lot of work with energy. And I don't know if I mentioned to you, but I've been working with someone who's developed some incredible quantum energy technology. And he's been using that for quite some time now. And the first treatment he had with the Buttafly, it totally changed his prostate. He felt his prostate relax. He's had all sorts of incredible experiences from it. And we had this conversation about how, you know, he's using all this quantum energy, and yet he's still a physical body. So I hope that was quite a long passing thought. Sorry.
No, it's beautiful. I completely resonate with that piece, is that once something is physical, you have to honor the physical. And we are simple beings as well. We are so complex, but we're also just made of earth, and the earth needs what it needs. So I'm so grateful for this conversation. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. It's just been a real delight to connect with you. We've been waiting a while for this. It's the right time.
Yeah, thank you, my love. I'm going to stop recording.